From that day on, we heard that in the gospel reading this week about the temptations and Jesus and the devil and what were the promises and how was he addressed. If you are, from that day on, once upon a time there was a little girl, and she was the 20th of 20 children born to somebody who worked the plantations in Mississippi. As a little girl, she would kind of wander around the yard while her parents were out picking cotton. And one day while she was out in the yard, the master, the owner of the plantation, happened to see her and said, "Oh, little girl, you know, you have such fine hands. I think you would be really good at picking cotton. Let me show you a little bit. And you know what? If you go out there and you pick a whole big bag of cotton, I'm going to let you go over to the commissary and you can get whatever you want after you're done doing the picking of the cotton." So as a 6-year-old little girl, she was like, "Oh, this is kind of a nice thing. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to do the best that I can." And sure enough, when she was done, he led her over to the commissary where she could grab any kind of candy or little toys or anything that she wanted. And she did. But then he went back to the parents and he said, "You know, your little girl picked cotton today, and she went over to the commissary and she got this, 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 and this. And so now you owe me this much more work." The little girl was tricked by the plantation owner. And because of that, her parents were told from that day on that 6-year-old little child was to be with them out in the fields, helping them, because she was a good little worker. And so, yes, the 20th of 20 children at the age of 6 was made to work the plantation and pick cotton. She was not allowed to go to school after the 5th grade because she was needed out there in the garden area to pick the cotton. This little girl, Fannie Lou Hamer, did what she had to do for all of those years. And then one day, she had a problem in her stomach, and she was told it was an appendicitis. And so she was ushered in to have surgery. But it wasn't her appendix at all. What they did was a hysterectomy on her because they didn't think that little kids that were picking cotton out in the field had any right to have babies after all. So the plantation owner deceived her. The people at the hospital deceived her. She got married, and when she got married, she wasn't able to have children, so they adopted children. And it wasn't until she was almost at the age of, 40-something, when she went to a national convention to nominate a president, and she had the guts to speak up and speak out loud and clear, and she was like, "It's high time that my people get to have a chance to vote." And she, at that time, from that time on, made a decision. Didn't come till she was in her 40-somethings, but she made a decision from that time on. And she moved forward. And yes, her people got the opportunity to vote. And we all have the opportunity to vote, but so many of us choose not to. It's a freedom that we have, and yet we don't want to vote. We don't want to waste our time. We don't want to be somebody who's identified with a certain party. What does it take for us to have from that time on and make a change in our lives from that time on? So we have the story too of, it's a story of Daniel Webster and how he toyed with the idea. It is the basis for the plot of the musical Damn Yankees. Dorian Gray negotiated through the painting on Faust, and he's been made eternally famous through the deal that he struck, a deal with the devil, a deal with whoever, just to get whatever you want. How often does that happen from that day on? And what did all these people in plays have in common? Life Today even. It was Faust, it was Dorian Gray, it was the lead character of Damn Yankees and Daniel Webster. They sold their souls to the devil. For knowledge, for beauty, for a winning season, for a political gain. These characters did the unthinkable. They struck a deal with the devil and gave up their souls. We would think of them as rather reckless. Would any of us sell our souls? Of course not. Who could be so foolish as to give up that part of themselves, that center, that heart of their lives, which makes them who they are? While the answer to the question seems obvious, I'm not so sure it is. You've probably seen it too, and I've seen the t-shirt that reads, "Lord, let me win the lottery so I can show you how generous I can be." What would you be willing to do if I could promise you $400 million jackpot from the lottery? Health clubs and gyms have become multi-million-dollar industries. Tell me, would you sell your soul for a perfect body? Better yet, for a perfect relationship? How many people are involved in business and work hour upon hour, day upon day, week upon week? Sometimes their families hardly see them. So did they sell their soul for success, for power, for prestige? Everything in the readings today is about selling one's soul. Adam and Eve do it for knowledge and the promise that they will exceed God. They will become gods. The devil in the gospel wants Christ to sell his soul. The devil offers him power, possessions, and prestige. Could Jesus not have had a bigger influence on the world with all of those things if he possessed them? Wouldn't the poor have benefited more from a prestigious leader rather than an itinerant carpenter? So much to gain. Why not just accept a little bit of the offer? All these questions greet us on the first Sunday of Lent. The readings today are trying to teach us that evildoers offer nothing. They promise a lot, but in reality, nothing. Like the false advertisements that bombard our lives and promise us everything but give us nothing, evil tempts us with empty promises. What Adam and Eve failed to understand, and what Christ is trying to teach us, is that it is only in God that we find our true life. Only in God do we learn what love is really all about, and only in God do our hearts become vessels of care and compassion for others. Lent is an invitation. It is an invitation to keep our eyes on Christ, an invitation with our eyes on Christ through prayer and fasting and generosity to others. We do this so that we might learn from him that only in God do we find all that we are looking for and yearning for. Without God, everything else falls to the wayside. And as we approach this season, you may or may not have been imposed with ashes on your head. Lots of the prayer experiences were canceled in the evening of Ash Wednesday, but still, it is a season from this day forward. How will we have been changed? From this day on. And the people said, Amen.